What is your first memory of playing Mega Man?
My first memory of playing Mega Man is when I was in elementary school. Even now, I remember dying over and over at the first part of Gutsman's stage. I fell down so many times.
My mom bought me my first Game Boy, and that was my first introduction to Mega Man.
My first impression was, I tried it out, thought it was incredibly difficult. So I quit playing halfway.
I always say this, but my first impression was, this is a really hard game.
Take us back to the beginning, 1987. Where did the original idea for Mega Man come from?
The game was conceived for the Nintendo Disk System, and the original concept was just to fight it out against different bosses in whatever order you liked. The plan was to make a new type of action game that had never existed before. But then, as high-capacity cartridges came out, they suddenly had more data to work with. The concept evolved, and they added the idea of including different levels as well.
At the time, it was still early in the history of video games, and there were quite a lot of games where you had to follow the linear route set out by the developers. But with Mega Man, you could select stages in any order you liked, which was amazing.
At its core, it has always had the unique gameplay feature of being able to choose your own order for the stages.
And this had an impact on the stages that led up to the boss fight.
Your choices drastically changed the difficulty of the game. That was a new experience, which no other games had up until then.
You could collect weapons from the Robot Masters. There were all kinds of elements that increased the replayability of the game.
Although it was a small game in terms of data, it offered high replay value, and being able to tailor the difficulty through your choices was great game design.
That was the original approach, and it became a major part of the concept. But there was one thing that really set Mega Man apart for me as a player. The games were all about technique. Beating your enemies required you to master the techniques. Also, being able to tackle the stages in any order lent an element of strategy. You had to think about the strategy and the technique, and this combination was unique to Mega Man.
Could you tell that Mega Man was something different, that it was something special?
At the time, Mega Man stood out because the basics were so logical and everything was designed in elaborate detail. It felt very intuitive, yet also difficult.
In terms of the level of quality, Mega Man 1 was a fantastic game.
I think the central point that makes the game interesting, at least for me, is that playing it is such a memorable, intense experience.
Mega Man is a game that appears simple on the surface, but it's actually very challenging and deep.
If it's simply about overcoming one obstacle after another, and there's always that tension, only a certain group of skilled players will be able to keep up with the game.
But I think that 2 was the game that refined it and made it an unmissable proposition for gamers. Then, the approach of 3 and 4 brought a wider diversity to the action. You could say that 3 and 4 were the ones that really gave gamers what they wanted. The first game brought us these new mechanics, which were refined in 2. And without those, we would not have 3 and the rest of the games.
Those original Mega Man games have some of the absolute best 8-bit music ever created. What do you think the secret is that makes those chiptunes so memorable and they just get stuck in your head?
The concept for the music was not to create songs that simply sounded cool or exciting, but songs that were sorrowful as well. The bosses that Mega Man had to fight were robots just like him, and they shared the same roots. Matsume-san and the other sound staff felt that this was a rather poignant backstory, which they drew upon to create the music.
Mega Man was originally created as a helper robot, but after he got involved in an incident, he was forced to go on fighting missions, even though he originally had no desire to do so. Moreover, he had to fight his former siblings, characters who used to be his friends. Those conflicting emotions and the difficulty of the game itself worked together to form the heroic image we have of Mega Man.
So out of all the Mega Man games, who's your personal favorite robot master?
I would say Cutman is my favorite. He has a very simple design. Since he is the brother of Mega Man, his body from the neck downwards is identical. But in the story, he has a very strong character. And the scissors on his head are so cute. You can tell from one look that he is a character who uses blades to attack, which I think is great design.
So in all of Mega Man, do you have a favorite robot master?
Metalman.
The Metal Blade.
Mega Man is incredibly difficult, so when playing Mega Man 2, I wanted to get his Metal Blade before trying to clear the game. So I tried the Metal Man stage many times, and he grew on me.
I loved how much personality all the characters had, and even Mega Man himself had a lot of personality. So how did the art style of the original Mega Man strike you?
The color palette stands out to me. It's not just overly colorful, but the colors are used effectively. The visuals and characters had the capacity to inspire various spin-off titles.
Mega Man has led to Mega Man X, Mega Man Battle Network, Mega Man Legends, Mega Man Star Force, all these different series. These have not been treated simply as spin-offs. Each one has its own dedicated fan base. It's a franchise with so much variation and so many high-quality games. And I think that's what makes the Mega Man franchise special.
At the same time, part of the appeal was also due to it being able to adopt and introduce various new elements.
As the series evolved and the Robot Masters piled up, the innovative core formula remained while new gameplay features and mechanics were added. Mega Man 3 introduced a useful slide ability. Mega Man 4 allowed players to charge up the Mega Buster to increase its power. Mega Man 7 ushered the 8-bit series into the burgeoning 16-bit era and added a new rival for Mega Man in Bass. Mega Man 9 and 10 were a retro revolution for the series, taking us back to its 8-bit roots with challenging and faithful gameplay that paid tribute to the series' origins. That brings us to today, with the long-awaited Mega Man 11 just around the corner.
Even now, we are very careful to stay true to the series' legendary action roots, and to preserve those elements when we make games for modern hardware platforms. The development team tests the games rigorously to ensure we have preserved that classic play feel. Only after we have cleared that hurdle, we add new elements that will add to the experience and not detract from it.
So while keeping that sense of difficulty, I believe we have been able to highlight moments of relief and achievement, perhaps more so than in the past games of the series.
The director makes sure that the staff don't get too carried away by changing Mega Man in unwelcome ways. That's a major point for us.
This blue boy who you can relate to fights enemies in order to preserve peace. He does not attack others, but fights for peace. And I think that resonates with a lot of people.
I feel that Mega Man is a hero who never gives up. No matter how many times he dies, trying again and again is part of who Mega Man is, and that makes him a hero.